Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. In today's video, we're going to check out Horizon Forbidden West. Welcome back guys. Real quick before we get too far into the video, I just want to put a spoiler warning here, as some of the stuff we're going to talk about is in spoiler territory. I'm not going to try to spoil too much just because I want you guys to go out and experience this game for yourselves, but just in case, here's your warning. Guys, I just finished Horizon Forbidden West, and my gosh, it was such a great game. I freaking loved it. In today's video, we're going to talk about some of the things that I absolutely loved, and a few things that I didn't quite love. I couldn't say that I hated particularly anything in the game, but you know, without further ado, let's just jump right into it. Starting off, guys, with the main story. This takes place about 6-ish months right after the first game. So if you guys didn't like the first game, there's a very good chance that you are not going to like this game. I know lots of people really love the first game. I know there's probably some out there that didn't, but this game literally builds upon all that stuff that was established already in that first game. So there is a good chance that if you didn't like it, you won't like this one. But I freaking loved the first one, and that story, this literally just builds right on top of that. It takes place just a few months after the events of Aloy, where they take down Hades. Like I said, this takes place right after that first game, and basically you find out that after you beat Hades and whatnot, the threat is not actually done. Like, all that work that you did, it worked, but it only temporarily stopped the end of the world, right? There's this group called the Zeniths, and they are also here to destroy the Earth. And so your whole objective throughout this whole game is you're trying to gather all of the broken pieces of Gaia, the AI that was in the first game that Hades came from. So I think there's like 5 or 6 different pieces, but there's 4 main pieces that you needed. You destroyed Hades, so you don't need Hades anymore. You need a Prometheus, Hephaestus, and one other one, Poseidon or something like that. I can't remember exactly all their names, but you need all these key points, parts of the AI. And so that's kind of what the whole game kind of focuses around, is you going out and trying to find these different pieces of the AI. And as you're going along, there's lots of tribal, conflicts going on with the Tenakth and the Karja, and all these different, political things happening between these different tribes. They hate each other as you're going into the west. That's why it's called Forbidden West. You find out that these missing pieces of Gaia are far further west than you originally thought. Kind of getting sidetracked. But yeah, so the story you're going through, and then you find out that the Zeniths are coming here, and they also want this AI to basically re-terraform the Earth so that they could be the way that they wanted to. So you're trying to stop them. Unfortunately, the Zeniths, as big as of a threat as they are, I just felt like their presence in the game wasn't as much as I thought it was going to be. And then it gets into a lot more like very sci-fi-ish type stuff, where there's a clone of Aloy. Even though Aloy herself is a clone from the first game, that was one of the big things that you find out. Well, the Zeniths had made another clone of Elizabeth Sobek. And so, yeah, it gets a lot more of the real sci-fi stuff. I don't want to get too much into the end game story, but just know that you're trying to find all these pieces for the AI, and the Zeniths come, and they're trying to stop you. And on top of that, you got all the tribal stuff. And then on top of that, you got all the robots that literally just want to kill you. This game is full, chock full of side quests. Not just side quests, but you got errands, you got the tall necks, you got contracts, you got fighting arenas. Like, this game is full of content for you to do, especially the side quests. The side quests aren't just like the typical, like, oh, fetch quests, like, go get this thing and come back and I'll give you 100 XP, stuff like that. Like, they actually have a whole full-fledged story behind pretty much every side quest that I did. I didn't do all of them. I was curious just to see how many there were, and there was like 47, I believe, side quests, just the side quest part, not counting the errands and the contracts and all that other stuff, the bandit camps. There was just like 47, and I did 21, I believe, of the side quests. And each one of them had like a cool, crazy story, had compelling characters. That's another thing. All the characters in this were very well written. Oh, I'm smacking my mic here. Very well written. I loved their stories, or they were written good enough that I actually did not like their character, but it wasn't because there was poor writing. It was because, like, oh yeah, you're actually a crappy person. But overall, guys, the characters were fantastic. The side quests remind me a lot of like the Witcher side quest, where there was like a lot of actually very meaningful side quests that actually meant something to the story. And depending on which ones you did, certain people would show up to certain places or to at the end for you, stuff like that. So there was actually some meaning behind these side quests. They weren't just simple. Reminded me a lot of The Witcher. Very, very well done side quests. For those that are wanting to know, the game, if you're comparing it to Zero Dawn, the game is basically ×2 on everything. ×2 in game length, ×2 in content, ×2 in quality. Like, everything about this game, if you just take that first game and double it, that's what this is. It took me about 50-ish hours and to beat the game. I think I beat it in like 52 hours when I actually got the credits to roll. And when you actually look, there's a data counter in the game, and it tells you what % of the game you've completed. And I was only at 47% completed after 52 hours. And after completing the game, there's just so much more that I still haven't done yet. So many more side quests, so much more, basically everything. The game is just full of stuff. And if I'm being 100% honest, even though I put 52 hours in it, I did feel like I rushed it a little bit just because Elden Ring came out, and I'm a huge From Software guy, so I had to hurry and quickly beat this game as fast as I could, even though it still took me like 52 hours. Moving on to the next is the gameplay. The gameplay about this game is so much more polished than the first game. The shooting mechanics, the arrows, I just feel like it's smoother. The melee combat is better. Just everything about this compared to Zero Dawn is much more polished. There's a few like new weapons. You got like a spear, and you got like this weird like disc launcher thing that I don't remember from the first game. And you got like this not tripcaster, the I forget what it's called, but it's basically looks like a crossbow that is basically a semi-automatic with arrows. It's just like do 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 do. So that was a lot of fun. A few other cool weapons. On top of that, you got a few new gadgets. You got a few upgrades to your spear. Your spear can now, break certain metal flowers, or it can break certain red crystals to explode walls. And on top of that, you got a grappling hook, which was a lot of fun, and I really like the new addition to the grappling hook. Not only can you jump from like platform to platform if they got a grapple on it, but if there's like items that are just out of reach and you can't climb to them, you can literally basically swing a grapple at it, rip it down, and then you got your cool item or your cache or whatever it's called, all that stuff. And you have a glider, which I thought was pretty cool. It's basically a broken like plasma shield. Like there's a few characters that got like these shields, which doesn't quite make sense because there's been a few times where I killed some of those enemies and it's like, why couldn't I just take their shield? Anyways, but you take the shield, it's kind of broken, but it lets you glide down. Very much Breath of the Wild feel, at least for me, at least with the gliding. It was a lot of fun. Talking about the melee combat in this is especially better than Zero Dawn. Much more fine-tuned, much more, I guess, fun. I remember that Zero Dawn's melee combat wasn't particularly something that I did a whole lot in the first game just because it was janky, and if I remember right, it's been a while since I played it, but the melee combat in here is so much better. But with that being said, I do wish that there was some sort of parry system. A lot of the, I guess, human-type enemies that are coming at you are very, like, telegraphed at what they're going to do. And so I wish that there's a way that I can, parry them and riposte or, something like that. Obviously, you could just roll away, like, when you see the attacks coming. It wasn't going to make or break the game for me. But I was kind of like, oh, I wish I could have just parried this dude. That would have been so much cooler. Also, I forgot to mention, and this is a big thing, there is a ton more new machines in this game. I'm going to butcher all their names, but there's like this giant tortoise one. There's a there's like a Thunderjaw, but a freaking more deadlier version of a Thunderjaw. I forget, it's called like I forget it, but if I find it, I'll put it up here on screen. But it kind of reminded me of that T-Rex, like Jurassic Park 3, where you got the T-Rex and then you got freaking crazy T-Rex with the spine. That's what this robot is. And on top of that, there's like these monkey ones. There's just a ton of robots. Of course, you got your standard robots, a select few from the first game. You know, some of the ones that you ride, and the eye-seeking ones, seekers or whatever. So there are a few returning robots, but I would say probably about half the robots that you encounter are all brand new robots. The Slitherfang was super fun. The Mammoth was freaking awesome. I loved the Mammoth, actually, and the Slitherfang, even though the Slitherfang was freaking hard. Kind of talking about, I guess, difficulty. This game does feel a bit more difficult than the first game. I just played on normal, and I don't remember having too hard of a trouble in the first game. This one, it just seems like it's a little bit harder, and I don't know if that's just me or my build, because there were different skill trees that you can invest in. You got your hunter, your melee fighter, or something like that. So there's a few different upgrades. I don't know if that made a huge difference for me, but it just seemed like every time I was fighting a specific robot or doing a specific thing, every time I fought one robot, next thing I know, I had like 6 robots on me. Whether I was fighting like just like a bristleback, and then all of a sudden like a what's it called? Basically the raptor version, or a freaking huge bellowback would come out of nowhere. Like it just seemed like no matter what I was fighting, some random thing always came out from nowhere. And now next thing I know, I'm fighting like 6 robots. Moving on to the visuals next. I don't have to, stress this enough, but the game is absolutely freaking gorgeous. Anybody who's anybody, if you just take a look at this game, it's freaking beautiful. I don't know what else to say about it. Just every time I turn the corner in this game, there's like, oh wow, that's freaking awesome, or that's freaking. It gave me a lot of like Ghost of Tsushima vibes, where every time you turned, it's just beautiful. Like you just kind of had to stop and just like look at what these developers had created. It was top notch, freaking beautiful. And I don't know what else to say about it. It's high quality for sure. Now there is a few different modes you can play in. There is the fidelity, which is like the fidelity and performance. Performance just targets that 60 frames, and then, or not fidelity, quality. Quality targets that 4K. I tried the 4K. It's 4K 30 frames per second by default, and I tried that at first, and then my eyes just had a hard time adjusting to that 30 frames. It is noticeable, but the game does look better. Like when you're out and you're just looking at, up on the mountain and you can just see down, it just looks better. I did end up switching back to performance just because I do like that 60 frames, even though it did dip in the quality a little bit. But the game overall was still incredibly beautiful, even in performance mode. Now, there is a little bit of pop-in. I noticed it when I first bought the game, but I think after the first update, it was kind of gone, and then the second update, I almost didn't see any pop-in at all. So they've pretty much fixed that, and those were almost back-to-back updates. The day 1 update, I believe, got rid of a lot of pop-in. I do remember seeing a few, but it was very early game for me. After, a couple hours in those updates, I didn't see any more pop-in. Now, there are a few boss fights in this game, specifically in the story mode. There's a few robots that you fight kind of in the wild that are also bosses in the story mode. I didn't count those as bosses just because you can run away if you want to. These ones I classified as bosses because you have to take down this robot in order to progress. And they were all really crazy, really super cinematic and epic. The downside to all the epicness and craziness is that every boss fight in the story felt very grindy. One of the robots that I fought specifically, I felt like I was fighting forever, and then when I died, I was like, oh, well, let me time it again. And I tried to beat it this time, and it took me 10 minutes to beat it. I did beat it on my second try, but I was like, wow, that fight felt forever long. And so I kind of was curious, and so I timed it a few other times, and one of the Zeniths that you fight at the end, there's 2 of them that are actual main bosses, and both of those ones took me a good 10 minutes each time. They were just very grindy, it seemed like. And that kind of, I didn't like that as much. Even though the first couple minutes, you're like, yeah, this is awesome. This is epic. Super cinematic. It just like is very repetitive. And on top of that, Aloy is super squishy, so it'd be like 2 or 3 hits and you'd be dead anyway without any healing items. So a little nitpicky there, but nothing game breaking, of course. I did mention this a little bit earlier, but there is a skill tree. I believe there's 6 different skill trees you can invest in. I invested in the warrior first, and then the hunter. I got both of those skills trees totally filled out. They upgraded, you know, power that I do with my staff during melee combat, slowing down time with my bow, adding like 6 or I think 3 up to 3 arrows at a time to do a ton of damage. And then I did a little bit in the trapper and a little bit in the machine and then a little bit in the survivalist, just so I can get a little bit of each of those. But there is a few different skill trees which kind of shake things up a little bit, and I actually like the skill trees. It's pretty fun. Now, we talked a lot about some really good stuff that we've seen in this game. Now, I got a couple of things that I just didn't like about the game. Specifically, I got 4 things, 3 of which are they're kind of nitpicky. They're not make or break the game, honestly. They're just my preference. So we'll start with those first. The first thing, Aloy's hair, right? Aloy's hair, the animation for her hair always just seemed like her hair was just going crazy at times that it shouldn't have been going crazy. And I felt like this was always during those cutscenes, and her hair was just like flopping around all the time. And it was just kind of like, what the heck? It was a little weird. Like I said, nitpicky. That was my first one. Second one is there is a lot of dialogue, especially when you're doing the side quests and main quests when you're talking to characters. And it would seem like the person that was talking to you would say this, you know, their thing that they're saying, and then it would bring up the dialogue wheel. You'd pick a dialogue, and basically Aloy would repeat exactly what the person before just told you. So there's a lot of repeat dialogue, and it just seemed to be annoying and really like kind of slow things down. Like, example, some Tanakh guy would be like, oh yeah, well, we need to go and destroy the Thunderjaw so I could save my family. And then the wheel would pop up and it would be like, so you're saying that you need to destroy the Thunderjaw in order to save your family, right? And I'm like, duh, you're just standing right there. So a lot of repeat dialogue. Now these two kind of go to the one thing that I didn't like, and then the other nitpicky. So the climbing was kind of janky, I feel like. And it wasn't necessarily the climbing, but more specifically the jumping from platform to platform. The climbing wasn't too bad. I felt like it could have been a little bit smoother, but there are so many times where I'm on one ledge and I need to jump to the other ledge. And there's just so many times that Aloy just didn't grab the ledge, and I'd fall all the way down into the water, to the ground, and I had to go all the way back up. And sometimes I was pretty high up, and so it would take me, it seems like a little bit just to climb all the way back up. And there was several times that happened, and each time I was like, ugh, seriously? And there was even a time in one of the bunkers that I like missed the platform like 6 times in a row, and I'm like, dude, why isn't Aloy connecting? And then finally she actually grabbed it, and it's like she literally hits the wall but doesn't grab it, and I'm like, that was annoying. And then kind of the thing that's more of the nitpicky side is that there are parts that look like that they are climbable, but they are not. And then there are things that are not climbable that you would not think that you could climb it, and they got like the yellow X's and lines. So I was constantly scanning pretty much everything because you couldn't really tell what was climbable and what was not. And it just seemed like it was kind of off in some places. Obviously, there was lots of places where you're like, oh yeah, that looks climbable, and it was climbable. But like I said, there are a few instances here and there that are like, oh, let me just climb up there really quick. And it's like, oh, why can't I climb this? So, like I said, those were nitpicky things. Nothing actually in my negative make or break the game. I feel like they were all minor things. Even the climbing, jumping from platform to platform wasn't a huge deal for me. And overall, I had a fantastic experience, guys. It was an incredible game, beautiful game. The story was awesome. Now, kind of going with my review, if I were to put a big number on it, I would give Horizon Forbidden West a 9 out of 10. An absolute blast of a game. And after Elden Ring, I'm definitely planning on jumping back into this and seeing what other mysteries I can uncover and what things I can find, because there's just so much to do in this game. Like I said, I was only like 47% complete, so I still have half a game's worth of content waiting for me. And that's going to be it for the video, guys. If you've played it, let me know down in the comments below what you guys thought. And that's going to wrap it up for the video, guys. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.